Let's talk a little bit about your journey, if that's all right.
Sure.
I mean, what led you to the presidency? Like, talk about that path.
Yeah, well, I started off coming out of grad school. I started working at Notre Dame. I was a faculty member at Notre Dame, and I was there for 17 years, and I did various administrative roles there too as I moved through the ranks and so forth. But when I left and went to Marquette University to be the provost, there's a different challenge in terms of bringing students to the university than there was at Notre Dame, which at top attracts absolutely top drawer students and turns away thousands of students every year they'd love to have. It's just and their graduation retention rate, their success rate is through the roof, and so it's not something we spend a lot of time thinking about or worrying about at Notre Dame, but it was at Marquette. And retention, really making sure students persisted and got through, was a much bigger issue challenge. It was part of our strategic plan, and we spent a lot of our thinking time and money investing in trying to help the university do better with getting students through to graduation. And so then when I went to American University to be the provost there, it ramped up to an even higher level. And so, there's just a really strong focus on retention and graduation. So I learned a lot about it from being at those two schools. And in my latter days of being an American, I was writing a book about graduation retention rates and looking at them across the country and trying to figure out why some universities do so much better with this than others. And I'm giving you a somewhat longer version of this, but chop it up as you see fit. The primary factor, the biggest factor, and this is not a secret or anything, this is not some big reveal I'm making right now, is that the kind of background, the privilege of the students has so much to do with whether they succeed or not. I mean, if they have money to support them, to help them pay their tuition, if they've had access to good education all the way through until they get to college, they're going to succeed at very high rates. And so those privilege markers are extremely powerful. I mean, that's the surprising thing. It's not that they're powerful, but that how powerful they are. In fact, they count for more than 90% of the differences in graduation retention rates in the United States across all the different colleges. More than 90% of it is controlled by just a handful of privilege factors. And so then you don't have a lot more to work with in terms of intervention space, because so much of it is just controlled by what you're bringing to the table in terms of your background. So I devised a way of doing this in the book where I control for those privilege factors first. So I correct for those, and then I see how the different colleges and universities do at getting students through to graduation. And so, and some of them do fine. They're kind of reflecting the privilege of their students. Some of them don't do as well as the privilege markers. They're not even living up to the potential of their students. And some of them actually beat the odds. They actually do better than would be predicted by their student body. And I ran all the universities in the country through that system. I ranked them. And there's a school up there at the top that I barely knew anything about, Misericordia University. Number 2 in the country, and it was only beaten by one school that happened to be a state school. So it's the number 1 private school, and its graduation rate is 21 points higher than would be predicted by the characteristics of its student body. That's astonishing. It's a powerful record. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting. What is going on at this place? And so I interviewed people at my top 10 schools, and I just called up, the provost of the schools. I said, hey, let me have 45 minutes with whoever your retention guru is at your school. And so I can just kind of pick their brain and understand what you're doing that's making you so darn successful doing this stuff. And so I did, and they were great interviews. The people I talked to, they're just the people that work in that space. They're just so dedicated to students and trying to figure out how to help them succeed. It was wonderful to talk to all those folks. And I wrote a chapter in the book talking about those different strategies that people were using. But when I got on with Misericordia, there wasn't one person for 45 minutes. They had their whole retention team. 7 people got on this Zoom call with me, and they're thinking about what they were doing was so smart and so penetrating, and they were so dedicated to what they were doing. And I was just blown away by them. And they stayed on for an hour and a half, not 45 minutes. They gave me double the time, times 7 people. I mean, it was amazing. I was like, wow, these people really care. And I got off the Zoom call and I turned to my partner, Kristen, and I said, these are the kind of people I want to work with right here. These people, they care, they know what they're doing. They're really thinking about this and doing it the right way. And I looked around, the presidency was open. So I said, somebody is speaking to me. And
Yeah.
it was also funny because I didn't even know where it was, honestly. And I was driving from DC up to visit my parents in Syracuse, and I'm driving up 81. And there's a sign I pass. I'm about halfway there. And I pass the sign that says, exit here for Misericordia University. And I thought, wow, the universe is coming together here. So I got in the search, and it was a match made in heaven. It's been a wonderful place for me to be here. So
That's
long story, but
yeah, and that's a tough market too in Pennsylvania.
it is.
That's a tough market. So I got to ask. So yeah, your retention rates, whether it be fall to fall or first year to sophomore, those are some of the highest marks I've seen.
They are high, and especially for who the student body is. These are not privileged kids. We've done an analysis of the family background and stuff and everything, all these consumer markers with our students, and these are not rich kids. These are not they're people who are they're kind of coming, a lot of them, from working class backgrounds. It's a real struggle for their parents to send them to school here. And that's part of how this thing works here, though, is that we're like, damn, these people are making a real commitment to their kids, by trying to do this, and we want to make sure it works. And that's part of the magic of this place, is that vibe exists throughout the university, the faculty, the staff. Everybody says their university is unique and it's so wonderful. And look at the material on the web and what we used to call view books. I don't even know people really look at view books anymore, but everybody says how great they are and unique they are. But there is something different here that's ramped up to a different level in terms of their investment in student success. That is, it's very powerful. And so, one of my challenges here is to get that message out to more people and have them understand that sending their kid here to us is going to be a winning proposition, and they're not going to have to worry about them dropping out or having to start over at another school after a year or something, because we're going to help them. We're going to figure out what's going on with them and make sure that we're intervening if something is getting out of step a little bit, so we can correct it before it turns into a big problem. So,
well, I'll tell you, that's a pretty unique take, I think, when we talk to presidents and institutions. There's such a focus on enrollment, which for good reason.
Sure.
But I think it's safe to say that sometimes enrollment and the focus on enrollment has really been at a level here compared to, well, once we get the student in, let's make sure we keep the student and see him graduate.
And that is a huge mistake. Anybody who thinks like that is missing the boat, because, and that's one of the things I say in my book. I'm like, retention is about enrollment. The last time I checked, a student who goes 4 years with you pays a lot more tuition than a student who just goes 1 year, right? And so it is very, very important in the self-interest of the institution as well, but certainly, of course, it is for the student. And putting those together in the right way and really recognizing the symbiotic value of thinking about enrollment and retention together is a winning strategy, and so there's no question. We are, even though we're one of the best around, we actually think we can do better. And so we're entering into a 5-year project to try to ramp up our culture around retention and getting people to graduation. So we're going to try to do more. We're going to adjust some things we do with financial aid. We're going to change some things in the student life experience, and we're just going to try to take that great culture we have and just take it up another notch or two and see if we can do even better. And I'm excited to try to do that because, there's nothing like, being on top and then saying, you know what? Last year, we won 64 games in the NBA regular season, but next year we're going to try to win 75, try to beat the Bulls record, but that's a great energy. It's a great place to be in terms of, driving forward with the work that you're doing. So,
Well, and so are the strategies different for, because you do have a mix of online students and on campus?
Yeah, we do. Although, for undergraduates, our bread and butter is on-campus experience. We believe very strongly for that age group that thick experience where there's a lot going on and you're engaged and connected to people in a lot of different ways is the best. Now, that doesn't mean online is bad. And in my view, there's a place for online. I don't want it to dominate an 18 to 22-year-old student experience. I want it to be a part of it, though. And I think it's a very important way for us to learn how to teach and for them to learn how to learn, because they're going to have to do that for the rest of their lives. I used to say that about big classes. I taught the biggest class at Notre Dame for a long time. There were 473 seats in the room and they were full. Okay. So, and a lot of people have negative things to say about big classes, and they're so anonymous and there's no participation. It's not interactive. That does not have to be true if you do it well and you have the right person running the class. Me and another guy who was really good at it too. Also, he was an anthropology professor, and we both taught and we were always duking it out to see who could teach the biggest class. But we were both really good at this. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's something that I developed over time. And he was great at it too. We both won teaching awards for teaching in that setting, but we would work together. We would try things and we would swap ideas, and we really learned how to make it interactive. But I didn't want that to be for everyone all the time. I thought that was something that should be part of their experience, because they're going to have to learn in that way. In other times in their life, they're going to have to go to some seminar in a big hotel room someday and, sit there, and they got to learn, And so we wanted to teach people how to do that. But, and it's the same thing with online, so it should be a part, but it's, for that age group, I don't think it should take over everything, because you miss some of those other elements. So places are trying to figure out how to build more of that thickness and those kind of auxiliary kinds of experiences for online students, but it's really hard. I was down at Grand Canyon visiting with them a couple of years back, and we were talking about this problem. I mean, they have 100,000 online students now, I think. And, and I was talking to Brian, the president, Brian Mueller, the president, and they're a Christian school. And so they have a big emphasis on that part of their identity and that part of the experience for students. And so we went to the big chapel meeting, which was great. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of students there, and it was very exciting and very engaging. They had the band up there and the really dynamic speaker. And I turned and I said, Brian, this is so great. I said, wait, how do you engage online students with this? And he kind of looked at me and said, we just haven't figured out how to do it. He said they can stream this, but obviously it's not the same experience. And that's been the case with a lot of these elements of a student experience that aren't as easy to replicate with online. Now, when you're talking about graduate students, they have a different need and a different life that doesn't require as much of that kind of stuff. And so I think the online world can be a lot better for them, and they can manage it better and it fits their life better. But I think for students coming out of high school and still kind of making that transition into independence and so forth, that if that's all they're doing, they're probably not getting the best educational experience that they could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so when you talk about a liberal arts education, and let's talk about, kind of tie that into the job market. So, you look 10 years from now, there's jobs that don't even exist today that are going to be around in 10 years, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And so there's that debate, especially now, of the value of an education. Oh, it's too much. I don't want to take on student debt. Hey, I can go get a job and get paid well.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the value of education, the value of liberal arts education, and why should someone earn their degree for their career?
Yeah, well, here's a little exercise for you. as you're going through your life, and I've been doing this for years, because I wanted, not because I was trying to prove something about liberal arts education. It was just, I just wanted to know. So when I encounter someone who is a successful CEO or, CFO or COO of a company, and, or in whatever way they've been successful, a lot of times these big business people are good people to ask this, and just ask them, what was the most important thing, the most important educational experience they had as an undergraduate that helped them throughout their career, helped them to be as successful as they were. I can't think of one time that one of those people didn't tell me something from their liberal arts curriculum. That's what they go back to and say, that's what stuck with me. That's what helped me. That's what made me able to negotiate my way through as I was getting promoted and having to work in different jobs and with different groups of people and things. It was the liberal arts stuff. And so, I don't know, I mean, it's 15 years ago now. So I wrote a chapter in a book, and it was called something like, I don't remember now. It was called something like The Practical Liberal Arts. And I was trying to make the case that as you move, not me, people get too focused on preparation for that first job, but we're trying to prepare people for life here. And so, the things that you get from the liberal arts, part of your curriculum, critical thinking, the ability to write, the ability to speak to a group of people in an effective way, to organize your thoughts, to read complex material and distill the important stuff out of it, the ability to sort out the signal from all the noise that's around us right now, the immense amount of data that's coming at us. That's what you get from liberal arts. And those are absolutely essential skills to progress in life and to be successful in virtually any job that requires a college degree, right? And so I, when people ask me about the most important things to do to prepare them for work life after college, I bear down on the liberal arts stuff because I think it's so important as an asset, as a human asset to help me do the things that I'm going to need to do as I go through, as you said, these multiple job changes, and have to not only move into jobs that don't exist now, but invent them, construct them. They're going to have to do that. And so that's my response to that. And I think it's absolutely right. I mean, and it's proven out by me asking these people. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and so how do you, when we talk to presidents, I think almost in any case, the community, local community in particular, is so integral to the institution and vice versa. Can you talk a little bit about the business partnerships you've developed and just what the local community means to you? And again, especially going back to Pennsylvania, just how saturated the market is.
Yeah, well, so I've been here not even a year yet. So I'm still learning, but I've invested a lot of my time this first year in getting to know who's out there and what's out there and how we might do better to connect with them. Because, I just start off with the orientation that the university is just a critical element. A good university is a critical element in any community, in any region. And it needs to understand that region, needs to have a clear understanding of what's going on out there and how we can both benefit from and help what's going on in the region, right? Because we can bring expertise in a way, we can bring training in a way, we can address a certain portion of the workforce development challenge that others can't in ways that can be very, very helpful. And so what was I going to say about that? So here in this area, for example, we have this incredible kind of warehouse and distribution operation that has developed in this area of northeastern Pennsylvania because of where we're kind of located between DC and Philadelphia and New York and so on. And so it's really become quite a crossroads. And the realities of COVID too have really revealed this dearth of expertise in supply chain and logistics. That's a real problem, right? And so there's a huge demand in this area, and there's an emerging understanding that this is a really important part of our business operations across the country and across the globe. And so we're putting up a supply chain major next year, and it'll be. I'm waiting for the last final vote from the faculty, which will happen this week or next. But and so we'll have that, and I think we're the only one that has that major in our business school right around here. And so that's just an example of really understanding what's going on around us, and then figuring out how we bring our assets to bear on that particular need or that particular problem. So there's all kinds of opportunities out there. This place is really good at leveraging internships for students, but I think we can do more. And we've set a goal to increase our internship partnerships by 50% over the next 5 years during our strategic planning cycle. And so we'll be trying to engage more businesses. There's no doubt that Misericordia is well regarded in this area, but the business school, I think, has been somewhat underdeveloped. And so, we're going to take the opportunity to try to grow that in a bigger way over the next 5-year cycle here. We're just going to have our strategic plan approved by the board here in our next board meeting here in June.
So one of the things that Plexuss wants to become in 10 years or far less is to become a household name. So Misericordia, where do you want to be in 10 years?
Well, boy, it'd be nice to have people be able to pronounce our name. We can start with that. It's funny you said that, because I was just talking with my chief of staff this morning about taglines and things for our university branding, and it's challenging for us because that Misericordia name is a mouthful, and people look at it, they don't know how to say it. I'm so pleased that you're saying it correctly, Brad. But yeah, I think we have the potential and we have a need, because, as you know, the high school population is dropping in the U.S., but it is dropping in this area of the country at twice the rate it's dropping elsewhere, right? So it's really challenging environment. There's a lot of schools around here. There's 93 private colleges and universities in Pennsylvania. I mean, it's really, you talk about a crowded market.
Right.
So it's tough. But I think so we're going to try to reach out further geographically. That's one of our aims, and we've tried to put some strategies in and work with some consultants to help us do that. We think we have a lot to offer this particular kind of population I've been talking about, and there's no reason we can't draw them in further. There are some high school populations that are growing, though. Hispanic students obviously is one, and we're a Catholic school. There's a cultural affinity there. We're going to try to work on that. And we believe that we have the muscle to really help those students succeed. We feel we've demonstrated that. And so it's a really good place for students to land, first-gen students and things like that, because we have developed these systems that help keep them online and get them through to graduation in a really great way. So I think that's some of it. I do think I mentioned the business school. This is a big focus of my activity in the next few years, because I think we can do a lot more and do a lot better with our business school. And it's just, every institution has a history of how things developed. And so I'm not criticizing or blaming anyone. It's just the way things developed here. And so we're going to try to do some things with that. That'll I think will be very exciting. What I would expect us to look like in 10 years, I think we're somewhat bigger than we are now, not huge. We love this really intimate vibe that we have, and students who are looking for that kind of thing, this is a great place to find it. And I don't have anything against big schools, by the way. I went to Ohio State as an undergraduate. I went to Wisconsin for my PhD. Those are gigantic schools. My son went to Indiana. My daughter went to Ohio State. They loved it. They had a great experience. There's wonderful things to get from those kinds of schools, no question about it. But there's also really great things to get from schools like ours. And I think that so we want to grow some, but I don't think we're looking to become some behemoth either. We want to maintain this intimacy that allows us to have such direct contact, intervention, insight into our students.
President Myers, first of all, loved your level of energy. It's really contagious. I'm definitely, and also you made a basketball reference to Go Warriors. We're in the Bay Area, so we're a little biased here, but
That's right. That's right. Being a Chicago Bulls fan, I was suffering when they looked like they were good. That was a tough season for me. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. And they're turning it around though. So it was a better season this year for Chicago.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to us. I mean, it's interesting because when you look at the history of universities, a lot of them started like through land grant and in the late 1800s and what have you. Why 1924? Give us a little history and a background of your school. And why was it in the 20s? What brought it? What is the history behind the campus? That would be really helpful to our listeners.
Well, I think there's sort of different versions of the history and what the university was founded for. And some people say it was founded to educate the daughters of coal miners, which seems to maybe not be entirely true, at least. Certainly a lot of coal miners' daughters did attend here. That's absolutely true. In fact, the chair of our board of trustees right now, she is literally one of these people. she was a coal miner's daughter, and and it really changed her life. Now, but I think it was, I think there was just there was a vacuum in this area in terms of higher education for women. I mean, I really think that's what it was. And these nuns, the Sisters of Mercy, really set out to try to address that need. And it wasn't specifically for coal miners' daughters. It was for, women in general. This university, and it struggled in the early years, as many schools did. It was the target of some really nasty activity from the Klan and so forth. There was a cross burning, a huge one out behind the campus, threatening. At the time, the Klan was very anti-Catholic, and so that was part of it. And they did a wonderful job here too of reaching out to the Jewish community, and so many women who were Jewish attended Misericordia, and there's been a strong connection between the Sisters of Mercy, Misericordia, and the Jewish community around here as well. So there's a sense of providing something that wasn't available to people, to certain kinds of people. That's part of the history of this place, and I think that's part of why it does so well with the things it does, because it's got that vibe. It's got that in its fundamental constitution that is trying to reach out to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to have the same full access to education, and really providing it to them. And so that's, I think, some of the history of the place. It became co-ed in the early 70s sometime, and there wasn't a moment when you could just say, bam, it was co-ed, because they started letting men take a class or two in the graduate programs or something first, and then it kind of drifted in, and eventually they started admitting men as regular undergraduate students. But it was in the early 70s, and a lot of Catholic schools became co-ed in that general time frame. So it's nothing unusual, but for a long time they were kind of seen as the sister school to King's College, which is in Wilkes-Barre here, and so that's where the men went. Catholic school. It's the Order of the Holy Cross, the same group that runs Notre Dame, runs King's College, and the Sisters of Mercy school up here with the women. And there are many of our alums who are, it's a couple where the man is from King's and the woman is from Misericordia here. And so that relationship existed for quite some time. And you go back and you talk to guys, that are old enough to be around when it was just a women's school, and they say, yeah, we'd go up there and try to meet women. That's what we would do. That's where we'd go to find girlfriends and find wives, in the end. And so there's a lot of that history too, in terms of the connection between those two schools. So there's a little bit of it.
No, that's very helpful. And you're one of the few presidents who actually has not just a TikTok channel, but also a Wikipedia.
Which, yes, there's a Wikipedia entry too.
Yes, so I did read your Wikipedia, and I do want to get back to TikTok, but I want to kind of stay with Wikipedia. And it said there that your father was a Baptist minister, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yes.
And all your school, you've been at Notre Dame, Marquette, always in Catholic schools. So tell us a background of your history and you know,
Well, yeah, well, not only my dad is a Baptist minister, but my mom became one in the later part of her life as
oh,
well. And so I had two of them there. So, but yeah, that was a big part of my life growing up, no question about it. Church life was central to everything that we did. But I went to, and we didn't have any money though. Ministers don't make diddly squat. And it was tough growing up. We essentially lived in poverty almost all of my growing up years, no question about it. And so when I went to school, I went to Ohio State because we were in Ohio at the time, in-state tuition. I got some scholarships from Ohio State and from local things in the town I was in, Zanesville, Ohio, from a donor benefactors who set up scholarships in that town. And so I was able to go to Ohio State for very little money, at least the first couple of years. And then I ended up working, night security and doing all the things that you have to struggle through. I was a janitor in a typewriter factory, and I worked at a beer drive-through, and did all the things you have to do to survive and get through school. And so, the story of students here at this school is familiar to me because I lived it. And then I I worked at Ohio State for a few years, and then I went to Wisconsin for my PhD. But when I came out, I was just trying to get a job. And I got a few offers from various places, but Notre Dame ended up seeming like the best deal. Now, I can be honest with you and say that I did not appreciate the religious and Catholic nature of Notre Dame when I went there. I thought it was like so many private schools in the United States that they had a religious identity back in the day, but they drifted away from it years ago, and some of them have even explicitly said that they're not religious or affiliated with a religious denomination anymore. And I thought, Notre Dame is probably like that too. Whatever, I'm going to go there and do my faculty business. And I went there and I found out that wasn't true. And I was adjusting a little because I wasn't Catholic, and I was wasn't used to all the different things that were part of that and that kind of student experience either, because I've been in state schools, when I had my education. But I came to understand it and appreciate it over a couple of years, and I sort of learned how to leverage the students' Catholic identity to engage them in really important things that were important for them to think about as part of their education, and it ended up being a really great place for me to be. I was able to get a lot of research done there, and it was a great place to be a young faculty member. And I got promoted into all these different kinds of administrative positions. And so it ended up being a really good place for me. Marquette, it was even better in many ways. The Jesuit identity was something that really resonated with me personally on a very, very deep level. And some of those, the priests at Marquette are still some of my very, very best friends, because they just brought me into a new place of understanding about myself and what I wanted to do as an educator. So it was wonderful. American isn't Catholic, so I was at one school who wasn't Catholic. People don't realize this, but it's a Methodist school. It's a Methodist school. So it still had definitely had tones of a spirit that was connected to religious training. Now, I think it's drifted away from that a lot over the years, but they still are a Methodist school, and there's our people from the Methodist denomination serve on the board of trustees and things, but it's not quite as full a part of the student experience there as it was at Notre Dame or Marquette or something like that. But when I went looking for a presidency, I actually went through this little exercise, looking at their mission and trying to figure out, first of all, if that mission resonated with me, and secondly, were they really living it? Because everybody has a mission statement, and they all, sound wonderful, and they're all about the students and the da-da-da. Yeah, but are they really doing it? And as soon as I saw at a place some sign that they weren't, they went in my no column. I didn't bother with them anymore. And the ones that were left that really seemed to have something going on were almost all of them were Catholic schools. And so they've retained that connection to mission in a stronger way than most universities have. And that was really important to me. When I interviewed here, I was driving people crazy, I think, because I said, okay, you've got this mission statement. It sounds wonderful. You talk about it, your charisms, and that's just, it sounds great. Tell me how you experience that on the ground in your daily work at Misericordia? And I did that with other places too, but their answers here were just great. People had something to say. They knew what the mission was, and they could talk about how it was actually being lived at this university. And so I just loved that. I thought, man, that's such a powerful resource to do the work that we are trying to do in higher education, to have that to draw on as you're trying to lead and try to motivate people and try to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. It's an amazing resource. And so here I am.
No, that's fantastic. And when Mr. Kodia was actually looking for a president, did they have non-Catholic presidents before you? Or were you the first?
Yes, they have. They have.
Yeah.
And they started having lay presidents, a long time ago, back in the 70s, I think.
Okay.
And so it wasn't as foreign. I wasn't as foreign of a character to them as it would be at some places. I mean, some places are still, they still have not had a lay president, and many are just having their first one now. It's happening because the numbers of priests and sisters is getting so small that they just can't find them anymore. So there's a lot of turnover, but that's a rough transition for a lot of places. But that had happened here years ago, and so that wasn't a problem for me coming in the door.
So with I did not have this question, but you touched upon something very important, which is faith-based institutions. And obviously you hear about Liberty, right, as being this, mega, faith-based institutions. There are smaller Baptist colleges, all various denominations. I mean, obviously we know the history of the Rockefellers and how they really support a lot of Baptist institutions. And there are a lot of faith-based that they started classes of Bible and what have you, and they're very to the book. So when you actually analyze faith in an institution, how do you define it? I mean, you said, is it the embodiment of an action? I mean, how is that? How do you go from dogma to actual, practice and spirit of it?
Right. No, that's a great question. And, I'll just go back to my experience at Notre Dame was one way to illustrate this. And so I'm a sociologist, which you picked up from the Wikipedia entry, I guess.
Yes.
And I'm sure it says it in there somewhere.
Oh, yes.
And so, sociology is very much concerned with social issues and social problems and all the challenges that we face in our society and in political relationships and so on. That's really what it's about. And at the beginning, I was, these kids at Notre Dame, they tend to be, on the average, quite affluent students from suburban Catholic high schools. Okay, that's sort of the modal student at Notre Dame. And getting them to even understand how people across the world live in poverty, and that the average annual income in Ethiopia at the time I last taught this class was like $262. I mean, they couldn't fathom that. They spend more on gas in a month than that, And I was really struggling with how to help them appreciate the reality of other people's lives, right? But I struck on it because I started to understand their faith journeys. And there's a lot of stuff in Catholicism about preferential option for the poor and how Catholic social thought and how we need to care about others and be concerned about these kinds of things. And I was able to use that, even if it was a superficial commitment, but they had some kind of commitment through their faith, through their Catholic identity, to social justice and to these kinds of difficult social issues. And I was able to use that to pull them into a conversation that was a lot deeper and help them to think about the structures that were behind these things that they had a superficial concern about. And so it's just one example, but it's how you attach faith to the things that people are studying in a way that can motivate them into a new kind of cognitive space about what's going on. Here we have, one time I used the term at Notre Dame, I said, wow, we got a lot of like do-gooders around here. And people took that as a negative statement, like I was saying, using do-gooder in a pejorative way, but I wasn't. I was trying to say, these people care about doing good in the world. They want to do good somehow. And they get that from their faith. And we have that here, I mean, all over the place. And there's certain majors and things that pull for students who really want to serve others. And that's part of our mission statement here, is like it says right in there, one of our key objectives is to prepare you to serve others. And that comes from the sisters' charisms, from their religious identity that guides them and us as being part of their world into service for others. And so I think that's just, these are just one example of how we empower ourselves with theology to do good things in the world, however it is that you end up thinking about that. So.
And it's what you're touching upon, the embodiment of faith, and not so much wearing it on your sleeve, but wearing it in your action. It's different from one campus to another. And sometimes differentiating that message for a parent takes a lot of effort. That we're not. This is how it impacts our students. Now, you alluded to the enrollment cliff and what we call the second wave of enrollment cliff, because we had one in the 70s, obviously, of the baby boom generation. And I was looking at literature the past 2 months. It's pretty much the same exact literature. Like Aston and Lee talked about the invisible colleges. It's like reading the same books. If I didn't look at the date, I wouldn't even know if it was the 70s or now, frankly. And so, being a president is complicated. You're a CEO, you're a mayor, you're a priest, all of it, all in one. And so, and a lot of politics, a lot of finesse goes dealing with the executive board and all of that stuff. So when you think about the next 10 years, because from starting 1925, we expect a dip all the way to 1931, and so what have you.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for that? And what are your top 3 priorities?
Well, there's a lot to be said about that. And of course, you probably, I listened to a few of your podcasts and, people were talking about it. Of course, it's not,
yes.
It's there's people always ask you, and when you're in a group of presidents, some people say, well, what is it? What are the things that keep you up at night? Enrollment's the first thing out of everybody's mouth, because it's super challenging. And we have in essence, especially with respect to traditional age students, we have an oversupply of higher education in the United States right now relative to the student body. So, that's just an accepted reality at this point. So what do you do about that? Okay, well, one thing is, the main thing is you got to find new markets. Put in business terms, you got to find new markets for your products, and you got to adjust your products to meet those markets, right? And so, let's think about who in the 18 to 22-year-old segment is underserved, and how can we serve those people? Can we help them find, maybe they don't need a full degree, maybe they need a smaller credential, maybe it's Hispanic students. Hispanic students are underserved in the United States, absolutely true. So there's a group we could work with and bring more of them to our campus. I think that would be great for anyone to be focused on, by the way, anybody who's looking for something to do out there, but Catholic schools in particular, because there is a connection. What about international students? Now, that's a toughie because it's so expensive to bring international students in unless they're affluent, in which case, they have access to higher education different ways. Anyhow, that's a challenge. But can we think of some new financial models that would help us bring more international students in? I'd love to have more thinking about that going on. And then there's people who are not 18 to 22-year-olds who have different kinds of educational needs. And again, the sub-degree credentials might be part of it, upskilling kinds of programs, helping people who have they got some of their college years and go, and how can we help them finish off? That's the territory where online is probably more useful, because people can't just drop their lives and come to our campus for a couple of years. They have kids, they have jobs, they have to take care of elderly parents. There's all kinds of things going And so thinking about better ways to meet those students' needs, I think is a real opportunity. And that's, that's where we can do some growing. There was one other thing I was going to say, it just went out of my head. Oh, I know, it's people who want to come back to the workforce. We had a program we put up when I was at Marquette for women who had stopped out for childbearing, child rearing, that had been teachers. There's an impending shortage of teachers. In some place it's not impending, it's already here, out there. And we thought, hey, I bet a lot of these people would, they get to a point where they're done, or their kids are old enough that they don't want to be at home with them all the time anymore. They want to, they want to come back and do some teaching. But they may be intimidated, or they may not be ready. They may not be up on the latest stuff they need in terms of credentialing. And so let's put together a program that specifically tries to meet that population's need to help them come back into the workforce and into the teacher corps. So that was a program we had in our education school at Marquette. I thought it was a brilliant idea, but that's the kind of thinking about what markets can be out there that could help us do better, and also help the world around us do the things that they want to do and achieve in their lives.
Now, when we think about differentiators, so you have a very good academic program and a lot of graduates in business management, nursing is very big on your campus, psychology, political science, sports science. How do you differentiate? You mentioned you're probably located in the most congested, I guess congested is not the right word, but.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
I don't have to say more, right? I mean,
yeah.
how do you stand out? I mean, I know you have, the embodiment of faith, you have great retention. But if I'm a parent and I see you all, what should stand out to me?
Well, I've alluded to it in a couple different ways during that course of the conversation, but for us, it is this personal attention, this small, thick kind of experience that people have here. And, there's this thing, I don't like to use it because it doesn't feel exactly right, but US News has all these different ranking systems. And one of the things they have is a list of schools. They call it A schools for B students. Okay. And they're intended to be, really great places for students who maybe they aren't the top door ones who are going to make it to the Ivy Leagues or something, or the Notre Dames of the world. But they're good, solid students. And maybe they haven't had the greatest educational environment around them while they're growing up and that kind of thing. Or they've got some challenges they've had in their lives that they've had to overcome, or they're going to have to continue to overcome. People have problems with addiction or whatever it might be. People who have anxiety issues or have learning differences that are going to be an important part of managing their way through higher education. Those are the kind of students that this place does extremely well with. And so if those are the kinds of things that are perhaps worrying you about your student being lost at an Ohio State and nobody noticing that they're having a real problem, then this is the kind of place where you can count on somebody noticing that this person needs some help with something, that they've run into an obstacle, they've tripped over something, and they need some help to get back on track and to guide them in ways that are going to make them be successful. That's what this place is about, I think. And we're not unique. No school can claim to be unique. And people try too hard to be unique sometimes, but being distinctive and having something that you do, have some things that you do really well. You're not the only one. There's other schools that do this stuff very well too. My top 10 in my book, they're all doing this stuff really well. But we're one of them. And I think that we've got a great claim that we do this better than many, many places. And so it's a real opportunity for those kind of students, or anybody who just wants to be in a thick, tightly woven community. This one thing I just can't get over here is that, like, the students love being here. They absolutely love it. And I've been at other places where students really love it too, but it's a little bit higher even than a Notre Dame, or, you know, they're just so dedicated to the place. And so I just need to get more people to realize that and come here and allow us to, you know, serve them in that way. And I think they'll have a great time here. But yeah, so that's what I think is the primary distinctive nature of Misericordia, along with some other things. You know, the smallness and the religious identity and things like that are important parts of what we do here. You always have to attend to your academic programs and things too. And you know, you just right now students are less attracted to generic kinds of credentials, and so you want to make sure that you have some niche kinds of elements to that people can pursue. So there's a, you know, you have a biology major, but it's got an environmental track in it that people can emphasize. And we've got social justice oriented things all over this university that are part of our marker as being a mercy school too. And that's another piece of distinctiveness. So if you want to be, you know, study entrepreneurship, but you want it to be social entrepreneurship, or you want to study finance and investing, but you want to study socially responsive investing and become an expert there, you know, this is the kind of school that will help you develop that kind of angle on things.
President Myers, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.